I have concerns about the litigiousness of American society and the litigiousness of President Trump himself. But of course, he just won a $15 million settlement from ABC News
Yes.
and an apology. So there is some merit to what he's saying in some of these cases. With respect to the Des Moines Register, the poll was an extreme outlier.
Joined now on the road to the White House by Mary Jo Jacobi, the former special assistant to Ronald Reagan, a former assistant secretary of commerce who was appointed by former President George H.W. Bush. Hello to you, Mary.
Hello, John, and thank you for having me on.
Lovely to have you. Are you looking forward with excitement, anticipation, and joy to the second Trump term?
I am certainly looking forward to it with a sense of relief that we will be out of this transition period and into a new administration. And like him or not, we will have a proactive president again. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's been a long time since the election day, and here we are with a little over 30 days to go. So I'm ready for the transition to end and the new administration to begin.
Right, you're being a little bit inscrutable about how far you're looking forward to what's coming. Let's try and get a bit of a clearer clue to that. That when he comes in, maybe on day one, maybe very early on day one, that the new president, the 47th president, Donald Trump, is going to be signing, you'd imagine, some of those pardons, maybe quite a lot of those pardons, maybe hundreds of those pardons of people who were convicted for their crimes in the January the 6th riots on Capitol Hill. Mary, are you quite comfortable with all that?
Well, President-elect Trump has said he will not pardon anyone convicted of violent crime, and I'm relieved by that. And of course, it is the power of the president to grant clemency and to pardon people who have been convicted of crimes, or in the case of Hunter Biden's case and his father, Joe Biden, people who have been accused of things or maybe not even accused of things, but still get a pardon. So I think it's certainly within the president's power. I am relieved that he is not going to pardon violent criminals. And I think there might have been some injustices committed with respect to those defendants from January 6th. So we'll have to
You
see
say
what happens.
some, but you accept that some of those serving time now are properly serving time. Some of those who were
If
not.
they were convicted of violent crime,
Yeah.
yes,
And there were
absolutely.
others, Mary, weren't there, who weren't on the scene at the time, but who were planning and coordinating and pulling strings behind the scenes and got really, in one or two cases, very long terms of imprisonment. Should those sorts of offenders remain behind bars?
I think it is up to the president and the advice of his Justice Department and the Office of Presidential Clemency to advise the president on who he should pardon and who not. And if you look back through the history of presidential pardons, there have been a number of, shall we say, unusual pardons and grants of clemency in presidential history, and a number of some rather unsavory characters, I might say, who have received presidential pardons. So it's up to the president and his advisors in the Department of Justice as to who he will get, who he will pardon. And I don't think it's just going to be this blanket, let's let them all out. He has said no violent criminals, so let's see what happens.
Okay,
He's going to have a very busy afternoon on January 20th. He gets sworn in at noon. He has a lunch at the Capitol. Then there's a big parade. And then, of course, in the evening, the inaugural ball. So I'm curious as to how he's going to manage planning his day to fit in all of the executive orders, pardons, et cetera, that he's planning for January 20th, day one.
Yeah, well, between the pardons and the executive orders, he'll have writer's cramp.
He'll be a busy guy.
He'll need a bit of Are you going to any of those big parties?
I have no plans to, no.
Okay, well.
It costs rather a lot of money, to attend inaugural balls. It's not just open to the public, first come, first serve.
Okay, all right. So look, if I happen to be in the neighbourhood, I'll spare myself the trouble of queuing up and hoping to get in.
Yeah, I wouldn't if I were you.
Oh, right. Look, we're going to see the business of appointing Donald Trump's top team really picking up momentum. What's your feeling? It does look as if most of those appointments, some of them very controversial, maybe all of them, will go through, will get their nod from the United States Senate. What do you think?
I think that most of them will, particularly at the cabinet level. But bear in mind, the president has about 4,000 appointments to make. And that ranges everything from ambassadors to cabinet secretaries to senior military officials, et cetera. So about 1,200 of those 4,000 require Senate confirmation. Those are cabinet secretaries, ministers of state like I was, and I was confirmed thanks to the Senate and President George H.W. Bush. And then he has a variety of other appointments to make. Of the 1,200, what they call PAS appointments,
Yeah.
President, Senate, I doubt that all 1,200 will make it, and certainly all 1,200 won't make it in a hurry. But I think particularly the most senior appointments, the immediate cabinet, I think they all have a very good chance of getting through what is a very onerous and often unpleasant process.
Yeah, I mean, let's pick up one or two examples that have been very, very widely discussed. And Robert F. Kennedy, who's the pick for health secretary, although he is a famous vaccine skeptic, I say skeptic, a vaccine denier in many, many, many cases. Does he look to you like someone who will and should become the health secretary of the United States of America?
He's an interesting person for you to pick out of this array because just this morning I read that a number of the big food lobbyists, and we're talking about $1 trillion industry, are lining up to oppose his nomination because he has said he's going to go after junk food and various additives. I happen to support him on that particular issue.
Yes.
If you look at the same product produced in the UK and in the United States, the ingredient list in the UK will be very, very short. The ingredient list in the United States will be 2 or 3 times that length, with all kinds of maltose, dextrose, other things, all of which are sugars, of course. So he's going to be up against big pharma and big food, and in many cases, big pharma and big food are the same players. He's going to have a hard time. With respect to vaccines, I think his position has modified somewhat. He's not so much anti-vax as let's investigate the vax. When a baby born in the United States will get as many as 50 vaccines before that infant leaves the hospital, one wonders if not just the vaccines themselves, but the drug interactions of those vaccines have been fully tested. So I think he has a lot of work to do. I don't know that he'll be able to do it all in the 4 years that President Trump will have, but I do think he will be confirmed, but he's going to have some strong headwinds against him.
Okay, what about Tulsi Gabbard, National Security Advisor, who has spoken, I don't know, not entirely, well, in some ways rather warmly about the Russian regime in the past. Does that concern you? It certainly concerns a lot of others.
It concerns a lot of others, and it will be investigated both by the FBI and by the Senate. And the Senate has its own investigators that they can deploy in cases like this.
Is that concern legitimate, do you think, Mary?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard some of the things she's said, but she has been in the military, and she has been in the Congress, and she has been vetted in those ways. So we have to see. But what I do support, regardless of whether I like the nominee or dislike the nominee, and trust me, there have been plenty of nominees that I've disliked going back in my many years of politics. I do believe that each nominee deserves to have his or her day in court.
Yeah.
And in this case, the court is the Senate.
Okay. Mary, there's no shortage of people that the president-elect dislikes. And the concern has been that when he comes into office, there'll be a process of revenge underway. I mean, just these last couple of days, we saw a lawsuit issued against the Des Moines Register, that ancient American newspaper, and a pollster, a respected pollster, who produced a poll during the election campaign that Donald Trump didn't like. For some, that smacks of retribution and revenge, and it concerns them for that reason. Would you be among them?
I have concerns about the litigiousness of American society and the litigiousness of President Trump himself. But of course, he just won a $15 million settlement from ABC News.
Yes.
And an apology. So there is some merit to what he's saying in some of these cases. With respect to the Des Moines Register, the poll was an extreme outlier. I mean, Kamala Harris didn't even go to Iowa in her campaign. And yet all of a sudden, it turns out she was running well ahead of President-elect Trump.
But you'll know, Mary, as a political veteran, that some polls are better than others. I mean, the election campaign in America was awash with unreliable opinion polls. I mean, unlike in other places, including the UK, America has so many pollsters and polling companies that are very politically aligned, and much of of what they produce cannot be relied upon. To pick on this poll in that way, that does look like a certain retribution.
It was because this poll was such an extreme outlier. In a number of polls that were outliers, this one was very extreme, and its proximity to Election Day was also concerning. So let Trump have his day in court. Let's see what the court decides. I personally think we're too litigious. I personally would have let it go. But I also think it was an extremely odd poll to come out when it did, the way it did, and it deserves to be investigated.
Does it? I mean, for a legal infringement, you think that's a possibility?
Yes.